was thinking about a couple of things. I had planned to write some things about myself as a child, and I still will, so I'll just share them with you now, because long time ago, I was what I'd like to consider a badass girl child. Really fearless, like so fearless that when I think back, I kind of feel sorry for my mom, because, wow. I liked to do like sissy tests for myself. I really enjoyed scaring the shit out of myself. And my sister didn't come along until, I was 4.5. And so I had a whole long period of time where it was just me, and I had to create adventures for myself. And even once my sister was born, you can't take a 6-month-old baby on adventures with you. And we moved a lot. So I had a whole lot of things to explore. And at one point we were living in a motel right before my parents were divorced, and I had a whole lot of unsupervised time. And once I got tired of playing in the big, muddy, dirty part in front of the motel, I discovered that when nobody was looking, I could kind of sneak off to the side and do some exploring. And one day, I found this sad little building, and I didn't know what it was, but the doors were open. And so I thought, well, of course I'm going in here. And now at this point, I think I was 5. I'm pretty sure I was like 5 years old. And I walked into the building, and what I found was a whole lot of really old people just sitting around. And they looked spectacularly bored. And I was excited because at that point I loved Shirley Temple, and I was convinced that I was that adorable. And that if I smiled just right, I would have the dimples. And I was seriously, at this point, I was kind of a neglected little beast, so I'm sure I did not have the curly hair, and I was a little bit of a ragamuffin. But they didn't know that. All they knew was, I knew that old people would love Shirley Temple, and so I was that for them. And they were delighted. These were some happy-ass old people. Because I was probably the most exciting thing that had ever walked into this sad little building. And I remember at one point, I don't know how to tap dance. But I was convinced that if I just focused really hard and just really believed and really felt it, that I would be a convincing tap dancer. And they loved that. It was delightful. I do remember having an entire room full of older people just losing their minds with happiness. And I felt like such a benevolent little creature. I was delighted, and I sneaked off a couple of times, and I think on my 3rd time, I was right in the middle of a really complicated tap dance routine when I heard my mother screaming in the hallway, "Sarah!" And I was like, oh my God, it's just like that Shirley Temple movie where the dad's dying and he's sitting in his chair and he's about to get hauled off, and there's the girl, and it was amazing. But no, it was just my angry mom. And she was horrified that I had slipped off, plus it made her look really bad, So I was forbidden from going to entertain the old people, and I didn't know how to negotiate that, they really loved that and I should be allowed to keep doing it. But so I learned from that was, in my relentless pursuit of self-entertainment, just don't ever go back to the same place twice. And the grown-ups can't find you. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if you're ever reading any kind of story about little kids can't have adventures until the grown-ups get the hell out of the way. If every kid's an orphan, or the parents have died, or something's happened, because you can't do anything as a child with grown-ups around. They're too, they're terrible. They're not good to have. So we moved again, and this time we moved to an apartment complex. And my parents were getting a divorce. And my mother was working a night job. And so she would be asleep in the day, and I would put a piece of paper in the big, heavy apartment complex door, and I would sneak out of the house in my Holly Hobbie nightgown, and I would sneak out and yeah, oh, that's not the one. There we go. So I would sneak out when she was asleep and have adventures, and I didn't even wear clothes. I wore like a Holly Hobby nightgown. I had no underwear on, and I was not wearing shoes. And I didn't have brushed hair. So I looked like a crazy child. Anyone who found me probably should have alerted the authorities, but I was very fierce and would not have allowed that. And so one thing I discovered was that in this apartment complex, the basements were all connected to each other. And so I would sneak down there and give myself sissy tests. And I would, there was a whole area where they would have like the storage facilities were in these big cages, and I would always laugh because I would go and look at everybody's stuff. And it would be like, everybody traps all their favorite things in the storage facility. So every adventurous, exciting thing that they owned would be just trapped in a cage. So that's where you keep like surfboards and skis and, you know, all the fun things that you mean to use at some point. And I would just walk around the basement and construct stories about what these objects were good for and how you would use them. And then when nobody was looking, I also discovered that there was this huge hallway that connected one apartment complex to the other apartment complex, and before you opened up the big heavy metal door, there was a light switch. And if you turned on the light switch, the light would come on in the hallway, which was great because it's an underground, you know, hall, and it's pitch dark. And when I discovered that you could go through there without the light and you could just turn the light off, I was so excited because now I could go in the super dark tunnel and just freak myself out. And so I'm this crazy, wild-haired insaniac, and I go into this dark, dark tunnel, and I would just I would just be shaken with fear, just totally freaking out, and I would feel my way along the hall, all the way up this big, long, and it was a very long hallway. And once I got comfortable with it, I never was able to see. That was never something that was possible for me. But once I got comfortable, I could run up and down the hallway. And I would run from one door to the next door. And I would run really fast and fearlessly. And I would scream and make noises, because as far as I was concerned, I was totally alone. I was just oblivious and a very small child. I'm sure anybody who could hear me probably thought this place was haunted. Like, what? There's somebody, some banshee is just wailing in the basement. And so one day I'm running back and forth in this hallway, and I'm just freaking out, screaming and having the time of my life. And the other door opened, and there was this man holding a basket of laundry, and he had just flicked on the light, and he was coming to do laundry on the other side, and saw me, and he screamed and threw the basket, because I must have looked insane. And I was like, sorry, it's okay, don't be scared. And so, you know, and then I ran away. And I got back into the apartment, and my mother had no idea I wanted to have these adventures, until one day she found out what busted me at that apartment was, I wanted to go up to the top floor, and I wanted to be able to look down onto the bottom floor from like this walkway, this entrance, and I jammed my head between the railings, and then I couldn't get my head back out. And I was trapped in the hallway, and I didn't know what to do, with wrought iron on either side of my ears. And I mean, I worked it real hard before I started screaming, because my ears were bloody in the back. And finally I just started screaming, and all these people come out of their apartments, except my mother. And they're all like, what the hell is happening? Are you okay? Where are you from? And then somebody's like, oh, I know that girl. That's the basement child. And they had to call, the fire department had to come and saw off one of the things to get my head back out of there. So we moved again. And this time my mother told my dad, you need to take her. I was 6, and she said, you need to take her. This is too much for me. And so my father arranged for me to come meet him in California, and I had to take a plane by myself without anybody. I'd never been on a plane before. I had to sit next to a little girl who was, she couldn't hear, and so I didn't know how to have a conversation with her. I was very confounded by that. And my mother had said to me, they were going to give you a meal on the plane, and you need to eat every bit of it. Every bit, because I don't know what your father is going to feed you once you get there. And so, because I was in first class, weirdly enough, the only time I've ever flown first class, they gave me this wedge of cheese, and it had wax on it. never seen